You might be sitting here reading this title wondering what prompted such a video. It's completely random, I know, but it's honestly a damn good question. Is Jan Blachowicz a top 5 striker in the entirety of the UFC? In my opinion, no, he's not. I don't think he's even in the top 10, but we'll get into that. During my recent video on Lucas Tracy, I laughed while responding to LT saying Jan is a top 5 striker in the organization. A lot of you took that as me disrespecting Jan, and a few of you even agreed Jan is top 5. All of this lore is why I'm making this video for you watching right now. I'll be attempting to figure out, is Jan Blachowicz a top 5 striker in the UFC today? To answer the question of today's video, we have to first figure out what defines a top 5 striker in the UFC. In my opinion, it ultimately boils down to 3 key things. 1. How effective is your style at neutralizing damage and returning it? 2. How many high-level fighters have you beaten using primarily striking? And 3. How many knockout finishes do you have in the UFC? To give you an obvious example of a fighter who fits this criteria, Anderson Silva in his prime was a true top 5 striker. With 19 fights in the octagon, Jan has a ton of data to pull from. Allow me to take you through the Polish prodigy's UFC career thus far. Debuting in the UFC on October 4th, 2014, with a 17-3 record, Jan would face Ilir Latifi, knocking him out in just under 2 minutes. Across his next 5 bouts, the Polishman would find himself going 1-4, losing to the likes of Corey Anderson, Jimmy Manuwa, Patrick Cummins, and Alexander Gustafsson. Now sitting at 2-4 in the promotion with a record of 19-7, Jan decided it was time to level up his career. Across his next 13 bouts in the octagon, Jan would go 10-2-1, even winning the 205-pound belt and defending it during the course of his run. Blachowicz would add finish wins over Devin Clark by sub, Nikita Krylov also by sub, former middleweight champion Luke Rockhold by KO, Corey Anderson by KO in a rematch, Dom Reyes by KO for gold, and finally an injury TKO over Alexander Rakic in a fight that he was honestly winning and outstriking Rakic. The Polish phenom would also add solid names to his resume by decision, with the likes of Jared Cannonier, Jimmy Manuwa in another rematch, Jacare Souza, and the current 185-pound champion Israel Adesanya. Aside from a draw against Ankalaev, a KO loss to Thiago Santos, and a sub loss to Glover, Jan has been essentially perfect in his last couple years under the UFC banner. Blachowicz used primarily striking to win most of those fights previously listed, outstriking Rockhold, Anderson, Reyes, Rakic, Cannonier, and Jacare. I would even argue he outstruck Ankalaev. The only fight in recent memory that Jan came into with a grappling game plan was his fight against Israel Adesanya. Without a doubt, Jan is up there in his weight class, with Jamal Hill, Ankalaev, and Yuri Prochazka as a striker. Many of you in the comments argued that because Jan outstruck Izzy, and people argue Izzy as a top 5 striker, that makes Jan a top 5 by default. Atrocious take. Chris Weidman KO'd Anderson in his prime. Is Weidman now a better striker than Anderson Silva? Fuck no. Khabib outstruck Conor on the feet. Who's a better striker now too? To say yes to that is like praising MMA math as truth. To truly figure out the better striker, you look at how many styles they figure out with striking. On the subject of the Izzy fight, let's break it down to see if he outstruck Izzy or if he neutralized his striking with grappling and landed total strikes on the mat. Beginning with the first round, nothing much happens as both Jan and Izzy feel it out on the feet and neither fighter really does much more than the other. The second round continues the same as the first, with slightly more grappling and activity from Jan. Overall, it's an obvious round for Jan Blachowicz, despite being so close. The third round begins all Jan until around the 4-minute mark, where Izzy lands the hardest strike of the fight thus far, catching Jan with a clean check hook. The momentum continues in favor of Izzy until around the 3-minute mark in the round, where Jan initiates a clinch and holds Izzy on the cage for about a minute. Both fighters continue striking tit for tat, with Izzy slightly leading the dance with his jab. The fourth round starts with Jan pressing the wrestling exchanges and landing a nice right straight on Adesanya. Jan scores the first takedown of the fight at the 3-minute mark of the round and dominates each position on top, landing pop shots in the process. Despite the 3 minutes of control and ground strikes, Jan only outlanded Izzy by 3 strikes in the fourth round, so keep that in mind. The fifth round continues with Izzy soundly outstriking Jan until the 2.5-minute mark, where Jan secures a takedown with a blast double and stays on top again, landing the most strikes out of any round, with ground and pound, ending the fight with a clear 49-46 on my scorecard, and on paper outstriking Adesanya. The official stats have Jan outlanding Stylebender 178 strikes to 78, but when you break it down, almost a third of Jan's strikes were landed on the ground, which doesn't necessarily constitute outstriking somebody. At best, Jan stalemated Izzy on the feet, but he certainly did not outstrike him. While stalemating Adesanya is still extremely impressive, a lot of his success came from the threat of a takedown. Against most natural 205-pounders, he doesn't even have that same threat or advantage. So let's play a hypothetical scenario out, where Jan is definitively the best striker at 205 pounds. Where would he stack up against my personal top 5 strikers in the UFC? My personal top 5 strikers in the UFC goes as follows. Edson Barbosa at 5, Sean O'Malley at 4, Wonderboy at 3, Izzy at 2, and Alexander Volkanovski at 1. Pound for pound striking technique, striking finishes, and fighters shut down by their striking are the big things I'm looking for, and Blachowicz does not even compete with these 5 fighters. I don't even think he competes with my top 10. He has a chance to without a doubt put himself as a top striker if he can outstrike Alex Pereira soundly. At that point, it would be extremely hard to deny him, considering he'd have wins over Izzy and Pereira, despite, kind of just stalemating Izzy. But regardless, he's still a great champion and a fan favorite. So, overall, can't hate on him, and I don't know why any of you would have ever assumed that I was hating on him, just for laughing at that outrageous take from Lucas Tracy. But anyways, if you enjoyed this style of content and want to see more videos like this, drop a like and a comment for the one time. We just reached 800 subscribers on the channel, so thank you so much for the support. It'll only go up from here, I promise you that. Have a good one, family, and I'll catch y'all.